Welcome to Aspen Affairs. I'm Debbie Braun with the Aspen Chamber. This series takes a closer look at the upcoming ballot questions so voters can make informed decisions. Today, we're talking about a proposal from the Aspen Fire Protection District, a levy extension and an additional 0.5% sales tax to support emergency response, wildlife mitigation, and facility upgrades. Remember, ballots will arrive in the mailbox the week of October 14th. Early voting begins October 21st, and Election Day is November 4th. So keep an eye out in the mail and really try to make a plan to vote. Well, hello. I am here today with Chief Anderson. Thank you for joining us. He's going to walk us through all the details. And for viewers, the ballots, again, November 4th, big election. Jake, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a really big ballot this year, and it has a lot of really consequential issues on it. So will you just start us off by talking about what the fire district, the mill levy override, and the sales tax, what that is about and what you're going to do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. The mill levy override or extension would basically just extend a 0.24 mills, which is a little over $1 million. That's paid off next year, that was originally used to fund the construction of the North 40 and downtown fire stations. Those will be paid off next year, and so we wouldn't actually even see any of that money until 27. But it's basically saying, without increasing the tax rate, can we continue to collect this money, reinvest it into fleet and facilities? The 0.5% sales tax goes more into what we realized, I guess, with fleet and facilities is that we don't shore up that plan with $1 million. We shore it up with a little over $2 million for the long term. So there needs to be some supplemental toward that. We've also had some pretty substantial cuts from the state side of things, so probably some of the same things you've heard from other entities that are dealing with adjustments in the formula. We'll see a pretty substantial shortfall next year if things stay the same. So we'll be shoring up that initially to maintain our current service levels, and then we're really looking to start, or at least expand, our wildfire division. Our wildfire division started out as one person, has evolved to two, and the reality is there's a lot of work we could do in that space for the community, and we're trying to move more meaningfully into that spot.
Well, didn't we just have the Woody Creek fire here yesterday or the day before?
We did, and we're very grateful that it started this week and not in July, right? Because it would have been a completely different story. The Forest Service was able to get up there and contain it at half an acre, and we did everything we could to help them with that, and that's another success story of partnership, I guess, in the Upper Valley. Yeah,
I think it's wonderful. So if this passes, both of them, is the district expected to raise about $5 million annually?
Yeah, and it's tough to do those projections. Historically, fire districts have not been allowed to collect any sales tax. This is the very first year that we can do that. Which is part of the reason we're looking at diversifying revenue streams so that we're not tied directly to that state formula that affects the property tax that is unpredictable for us. And so, yeah, that's where we're at. And what I would say is the number that you'll see in there is a pretty large, I guess, over calculation. We tried to aim really high, although we'll plan very low. And then, like, what are we talking about here? Like equipment, facilities, staffing, or really just that wildlife program? Or wildfire,
Wildfire.
Yes, and yes.
Wow, that's a lot.
So, yeah, fleet and facilities. The cost of a fire truck when we bought our most recent ones that are still pretty new, about $700,000. That's already almost doubled. I think the last we looked was about $1.2 million per truck. When we replace our ladder truck, which comes up soon, that'll be over $2 million just by itself. About a third of our fleet is at or nearing its useful life, right, when things start to kind of degrade and become less safe and less effective. So that's one piece of it. And then the wildfire aspect of it is clearly a spot that the community could use. The cool thing about that, I guess, with wildfire mitigation is that it isn't an unsolvable problem. Right, there are evidence-based measures that we can take that are more affordable than you think, that can actually make a huge impact. And the best-case scenario would be in Aspen, where wildfire is not as big of a deal as we're thinking of it as today. Right, like we can actually make this a wildfire-resilient community, but it's going to take a substantial and lengthy investment in time, energy, and money to make it happen.
Where do you buy your fire trucks from?
Oh, that's a great question. We do go out to multiple vendors. What I would say is we could kind of go way down that rabbit hole because several of them have been. There is some. What do you call it? I'm trying to think of exactly the correct word, but basically hedge funds and bigger money partners that have moved into that space, which have really driven up costs for those. And so the last few trucks that we got were from Pierce, but I think they're on a 5-year construction timeline at this point. So we would definitely be exploring some other options when we go back to the drawing board for the next trucks, because we need some of them within the next few years.
I was telling you earlier, my dad was a fire chief, and every time he bought a truck, he got it out of Maryland. From Pierce, I believe, and then we would drive it back to Alaska.
Oh, wow.
I know, it was pretty fun as a kid. Yeah. Okay, call volumes have gone up significantly in recent years between the structure fires, rescues, and medical calls. What's driving that increase, and how's the department keeping pace?
That's a really good question. I think there's a lot of factors driving the increase, right? From increased, or at least fluctuating visitorship. Even with the short-term rentals becoming more of a mainstream thing, one of the things that I feel like I notice, and I don't have any data to back this up, is that we seem to have more semi-full-time residents, right? People who are here for a big portion of the year instead of just visiting during the holidays, et cetera.
Yeah.
I think another thing...
That's true. I just want to say from the research from the Chamber is a lot of times residents are sort of angry by behaviors of visitors, and then when you dig in there a little deeper, they're actually second homeowners since COVID. They're using their properties much, much more than they did before, and they're not getting the right messaging. So it's something we've had to pivot a little bit to help those new residents understand the values of our community as well.
Yeah.
So you're on target.
Okay, great. Well, it's good to know that just basic observations are in alignment with reality.
Yeah.
And I think another piece of it too is in this highly technologically advanced society we live in, we also just have to be much more transparent, right? And so we have to collect this data. We have better data than we've ever had. Yeah. And I think the community also expects more out of us, right? We have a combination fire department, so we still have over 50 volunteers. We have between 7 and 9 paid staff on a day. And between those programs, we're able to manage much more than probably we could historically. Yesterday is a great example. We had 3 structure fire calls during the day yesterday. 2 of them happened concurrently. One of them was dealt with easily. The other one was very substantial. And we were able to run 5 additional calls between the people we had on duty, the volunteers who showed up, and our partnerships with our neighboring agencies. And so not only are we getting a lot of calls, we're getting a lot of concurrent calls.
That's exhausting.
It was intense, and it's happening more often than
That's what it looks like, yeah. You've said in local interviews that the district modeled different revenue scenarios based on sales tax trends. Did your team also build a buffer in case that collections fall short, say 10 or 15%? And I'm thinking about, you said 2027 is when you're going to begin to see that money, and I know the airport's going offline. So have you guys built in those buffers if the sales tax comes in under?
Yes, we have, to the degree that we can. Like I said, even getting good data on the shapefile that is the fire district and not the city or the county is challenging. Also, our sales tax doesn't include a lot of items, right, because we have so many exemptions.
Tell me about those exemptions.
So the exemptions would be, they're the state exemptions. That's the easiest list to go off of. Yeah. But essentially it's groceries, baby products, things for school, all the medicines, prescriptions. So it's more your kind of daily purchase necessity type of items. Yeah. But that amounts to at least a 35% decrease in revenue from that 0.5%. So it's not the same 0.5% as someone else necessarily.
Okay. I think that's really good to know.
And what was the question before that?
What did I ask you? Let's see. Did your team build in the buffer in case of collections coming in, so it's like 10 to 15% down?
Yes, and so that's kind of what we're looking at is when we hire additional staff for the wildfire program or things that we're going to have that we know are going to recur every year. If, say, we were going to get $5 million, we can't allocate all $5 million of that toward ongoing recurring expenses, right? There has to be things that we could flex, such as wildfire programs, where we try to get more donations this year to do mitigation if we were to fall short, or even our capital program. Okay, we can't buy that engine this year, we have to wait till next year. Do
you have reserves with the fire department right now?
We do. They're Inadequate by most standards, especially I was at a conference recently, the SDA recommended, that's the Special Districts Administration, of which the fire is a special district, Aspen Fire Protection District, and they recommend a 60 to 70% of your annual operating revenue as reserves.
Okay.
We currently have about 10 to 15.
Okay.
So that's not where we want to be, and part of this would be hoping to build up some reserves too, just to make sure that we're resilient. In our business, we always want to have plan A, B, C, D, E, and F, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to rely on anything solely, and that's what we're trying to do with our funding sources as well. It's not be just solely property tax based,
right?
But diversify things so that we can bend and flex and
right.
And be resilient.
The sales tax, we were talking earlier in the other show, there seems to be a direct correlation with the sales tax and the visitor, because if a visitor's here and we had a wildfire incident, we would be moving those visitors around as well. So, or frankly, they're in the campgrounds, they could cause a fire. So I do see a correlation with that sales tax making sense, because the visitor, after the exclusions, it seems like the visitor will be paying a bit of that sales tax.
Yes,
a large bit.
And I think you kind of see it in different places too. I know someone just mentioned something they saw over by Buena Vista driving out of town where it said visitors can help.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen some similar stuff throughout
in
this
Basalt,
valley.
they have it right now in the lodging tax, because
Yeah.
that's for affordable housing, and their sign says visitors can help.
Yeah, and I'm not totally familiar with those campaigns, but that is part of it. Is we not only the direct services that we're providing, but the fact that that you can come here and vacation and ride a mountain bike or go skiing and do it in a very safe place where if something does go wrong, you've got this entire system of, the Aspen Ambulance District, the hospital, ski patrol, the fire department, you're going to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Right, and that feeling of safety is something that most of us just take for granted, right? And unless you're traveling outside of the country often, you don't really have to have those thoughts, right? Alaska, I guess would be a place where you want to be radically self-reliant.
Kind of, yeah.
But often down here, people are just expecting themselves to be taken care of, and a lot of people don't understand that Aspen's a very different community than many of the cities that they're coming from.
Right. Did you guys, did you study, is there like a tipping point where raising the rate too much, the sales tax rate, could backfire and people might spend less here in town, or we might get less visitors?
That's a topic we talked about a lot.
You did.
Right? Well, and I think, we're all concerned with the aggregate sales tax rate increasing, right? And I say that personally. That's something that I think about. The folks that we talked to in general said that in a destination community, typically that's going to be less impactful and impactful for a shorter term, because a lot of people, when they're buying services, it's different than buying necessities.
Right.
I don't know any of that to be factual, right? I think in general that's a concern of ours. I don't know exactly where that tipping point would be. I do still think that we're in alignment with other mountain communities throughout the country and throughout the state. But yeah, I guess I don't necessarily know specifically that. I do know that of all the fire districts that have gone out and asked for a sales tax, we're the smallest one I know of at a 0.5%. I know of a 2.5, a 1.5, a 0.7. And I know, and even for us, a lot of the feedback we've gotten is, why aren't you asking for more, right? You could take care of so much more. And we're trying to approach this from a holistic perspective where we're extending a small mill, we're adding in a reasonable sales tax, and then we're also considering other revenue sources that are unique to this community, like donations. Right? We have a wildfire foundation, and we're going to continue to try to get donations and leverage whatever money we can put towards wildfire mitigation as a fire district into cost matching with other entities, whether it's other governments or private businesses that are willing to say, hey, if we can give you guys $100,000 toward a fuels project, can you match us?
Yeah.
And try to leverage this and make it go as far as we can, because
that's great.
We're doing everything we can, I guess, to keep it affordable and to be as minimally impactful on the monetary side and maximum impact toward the community and our sustainability into the future.
Yeah. When was the last time you asked the voters for a tax?
So we've never asked for a sales tax.
Okay. So this is first time?
First time for this. Because, again, that was statutorily not allowed for fire districts specifically until this year.
Okay.
And then the last time we went to the voters for a mill increase was in 2018, so well before I was here. But that mill increase did allow us to bring staff into the stations, build up our programs into what they are today. Another thing that we're really kind of laser focused on over the next year is our ISO rating, which is the Insurance Services Office, which rates communities on their fire protection, their water system, et cetera. And right now we have a rating of 4 out of 10, which is the poorest in the valley. And I don't know specifically why. That was done, again, 5 or more years ago. We're expecting that rating process to happen again next year, and we're targeting a 2. If we're able to achieve that, that could be really impactful for our homeowners and our businesses. And that's kind of one of the unique things about a fire district is if we can up our performance, we might actually be able to save you money with the money that we're collecting. I don't know that a lot of entities can give that kind of return.
That's true. How does Aspen actually proposed sales tax compare with our nearby districts, like, say, Snowmass, Basalt, Carbondale? Are we competitive regionally?
You know, as far as the aggregate sales tax, I'm not entirely certain, right? I could speak.
But does Carbondale, Basalt, do they have sales tax?
The fire departments?
Yeah.
I know Carbondale is going for a sales tax this year.
That'll be on this ballot.
Yep, I believe so.
Okay.
And then I've been told that Roaring Fork is exploring that too, but they're right in the middle of other projects on their end, so they're not doing it this year.
Okay.
I've been told they might do it next year, but I can't really speak to that.
Have you guys been working on like a facilities master plan? Do you have that? Do you have a strategic plan?
No, great question.
Those types of documents.
Yeah,
so there's some accountability in the money that's coming your way.
Yes, absolutely. So part of our strategic plan are our current facilities, right, and figuring out how to maximize their life.
Yep.
What I would say is if we were to do a facilities master plan, which is something that we have, planned in the future, if we were looking at doing something like building new stations or new housing projects, et cetera, that would go beyond the scope of this.
Okay.
This is meant to take care of fleet in our current facilities, maybe with some good upgrades, right, for just health, safety, et cetera. But it's not necessarily meant to remodel all 5 of our fire stations.
Okay. And do our viewers even know that you guys have that great community room at the fire station? So you guys are bringing in community for different events. I mean, I've been in there a few times. Do you see a lot of usage in your community room?
I feel like we've been seeing more.
Yeah.
And I think, some of our focus over the past couple of years has been reaching out and kind of getting off the island that a fire district can become, because we're not a part of the city, we're not a part of the county. We can just sort of be on our own.
But you are part of the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I need to see those hot dogs on the 4th of July, right?
Well, and we take a lot of pride in that.
Yeah.
And I think people, our organization knows that part of our success is the fact that we are so deeply tied into all of the people who live here.
Yeah.
It's one of the coolest things about our volunteer program, right? It's neighbors helping neighbors. And I say, every firefighter's a volunteer, right? Even if you get compensated, there's no benefits package that some office geek like me can offer somebody to go into a burning building and try to pull someone out of there, right? To try to go get a stranger. So all firefighters volunteer at that level. Right? So I can pay someone to check the trucks, I can pay them to clean the stations, I can pay them to train and do all that stuff, but in the end, they have to make that decision if they're going to put themselves in that position. And what's really cool about this fire department is we hire typically from our volunteers, even for our full-time folks. And so everyone who's in this fire department has some sort of tie to this place and its people. And we're just an extension of the community.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really powerful thing. I think that's why you see so much pride in what we do and why everyone's so invested in making sure that the community's successful and that the fire department's successful. So the same thing.
Yeah. If the measures don't pass, what's the backup plan?
Oh, boy.
Do you have one?
Yeah, we do. We have
Okay.
several. And one of them is I'd have to ask to reappropriate monies that are currently put toward housing for the future back into operations. The reserves that we do have are currently dedicated toward operations and emergencies. We would have to start using more of those. We've used our reserves this year to help fund the capital plan. Next year, if things stay status quo, the capital plan will be unfunded, and so will the housing plan, as we pull all that money back into operations.
And still light on your reserves, too.
Yes.
For emergencies that could happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I don't want people to ever be afraid. We are always going to show up, and we will always figure that out.
Yeah.
We are going to be there for you. But we're not going to be able to expand services or improve things or any of that until we get this financial situation figured out.
Right.
The cuts that happened at the state, the first year that they happened, the state was statutorily obligated to backfill those cuts, which they did. The very next year, even though it's still an obligation that the state should be backfilling fire districts, it's not happening because there is no money available. And that was sort of part of that language as well, is we'll give you money as long as there is money. There will never be money again. And so we're looking at close to $650,000, $700,000 just over the last 2 years in decreased revenue.
Wow.
And there's really the thing when they start cutting property tax rates, on the Front Range, it's all well intended, right? But because of Tabor, there is no mechanism to bump that back up.
Right.
Once it's cut, it's cut. The only way to be bumped back up is for us to go to the voters again and say, hey, again, yeah, we know we just talked to you 2 years ago, but they changed the game on us. We have to talk to you again.
Yeah, I think the state's asking quite a bit from a local community. If it's schools, if it's fire, it's really, they're saying, you're kind of on your own for the funding for our schools, for fire protection, and it's a lot of additional costs that our community needs to absorb. But if you did a SWOT analysis of the whole thing, I think we'd want a strong fire department, strong schools, versus potentially a fire taking us all out, not a good education system. I think that weakens the Aspen story in a sense, but it is quite a lot. I think we have to acknowledge on businesses and on individuals, and I feel like our community steps up the majority of the time. So we asked, what happens if it doesn't pass? What happens if it does pass? What does 10 years, Jake, look like at the fire department with this funding source that you have that is in place? What do you think it looks like?
Yeah, so the 10-year picture, if all goes well, right, and things move ideally, is that we have a wildfire resilient community, and that it becomes part of something that we live with and not something that we fear, right? Because as you talked about, that's a situation that could be catastrophic, right? Yeah. It could threaten lives, it could threaten properties. It also threatens the brand, it threatens the economy, it threatens this beautiful place that we call home, and it could all change in just a couple of days, right? And so I think success really looks like a place that is wildfire resilient, right? Wouldn't it be great if the solution wasn't evacuate town, if the solution was go to town? Town is a pretty safe place to be. And I think we can get there, right? Again, it isn't some crazy idea that this is possible. There are evidence-based measures that we can take in a calculated manner to make a huge impact. We just have to start taking those steps, because it's not the kind of thing that happens overnight. It's going to take us 5 years to be at the spot where we're like, okay, we're looking pretty good, and probably another 5 to say, okay, things look really good. Now we have to worry about maintaining it, right? Because even if you go in and you do fuels reduction on a place, even the prescribed fire that was such a huge success this spring, that has to happen again. Yeah. Right? It might not be for 10 or 15, 20 years, but it does have to happen again. That stuff's going to grow back. And so as we treat these areas, and we're actually returning them to a more natural state in many cases, right? Because fire is part of the cycle of a forest. It's a rejuvenative process. And if we exclude it from the forest itself, it behooves us to go in and mechanically try to recreate that disturbance, because it's better for wildlife habitat, it's safer for us for fires, and actually it's easier to walk through and better to even look at. So to me, I'd say that's a huge piece of it. Your fire department's always going to be here for you. Yeah. We're going to figure that out. That's what we do. But we think we can be here for you in a better way, and we're hoping that we get the opportunity. Who's in charge of the evacuation plan? If I have to hear somebody tell me, what's the evacuation plan one more time, who's in charge of that? It's a good question. it's not actually your fire department. I don't want to throw anyone else under the bus. We're actively involved in driving that conversation forward, and I would say that conversation is taking some dramatic and very meaningful steps over the past year.
Okay.
We have the Genesis EVAC system, which has pre-identified zones in it that we could also change on the fly if we need to. But with the push of a couple buttons and a little bit of coordination, we can say, hey, these areas need to evacuate. These are on pre-evacuation, and that stuff. Even just getting that system implemented this year brought us light years ahead of where we were.
Right.
Evacuation in general for this town is pretty straightforward. I think people know where they're going.
I guess it depends where the fire is, right?
It does. And there are circumstances where the evacuation route might not be the safest place to go. And so we might tell you to shelter in place or move to an area of refuge. An area of refuge looks like a non-combustible structure like a parking garage or a big open area like a park. I'm
sheltering in the river.
Depends on where you go.
I guess that's where I think I'm headed, but the parking garage is probably a good one. I hear that the golf course, another great place.
You get to the golf course, you're good.
Yeah, you're pretty good from there. Chief Anderson, with all respect, if somebody is on the cusp right now, they don't know if they want to vote yes or no, and they're like, why am I voting yes for this? If you had 30 seconds to tell them why it's so incredibly important, really, what would you say?
Again, I would just reiterate that these are solvable problems. There's evidence-based steps that we can take to fix them.
Okay.
And we are trying to do this in a very responsible way and come up with a holistic program where we're not just trying to look at one thing. We're trying to look at it from multiple angles and solve a long-term problem. It is tough when you try to solve a long-term problem and then the rules change. So I understand the frustration there. But I think, I would just have people come in and talk to me. If they have questions about it, I'm more than happy to sit down and show them the math, show them the numbers, show them what changed, and show them where we're trying to go.
I feel like all the ballot initiatives this time around, in my opinion, seem very worthy. They're all interconnected and they're worthy, yet all of it together seems a little overwhelming. So if you had to pick one person who wasn't going to win, no, I'm just joking, just joking.
That's awesome.
I really hope everybody gets out and makes informed decisions. That's really the most important thing, is you understand what you're asking for, how it affects us as residents and as visitors, and what we can do to help be part of the solution and not the problem. So I really appreciate you being here today. Thank you, Jake, for walking us through the details. For viewers, let's just remember, ballots should arrive mid-October, like shortly. Early voting starts October 21st, and Election Day, Tuesday, November 4th, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Stay informed, talk to your neighbors, and most importantly, make sure your voice is heard. I'm Debbie Braun, and this is Aspen Affairs. See you next time.